the word of the year is parasocial, right? We
Absolutely.
have that, it's the one-way deep relationship that fans have with creators. Jimmy Carr, a comedian in the UK, was asked the question, what's it like to be famous? He said, it's like having Alzheimer's. What do you mean? He says, well, everyone knows who I am and no one knows, I don't know who anyone else is, right?
Yes.
So they come up to me and say, hey, Jimmy. And I go, no idea who you are.
Yeah.
I think in a parasocial relationship, we have that same thing. James and I will have people come up to us and say, oh, I heard about your dog the other day, or your daughter's at this university. And I'm going, how do you know these things? And I go, well, I told you, right?
Hello, and welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, a podcast about the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Jean Belenke of NJB Media, podcast and media strategy, marketing, and audience development.
And I'm John Kiernan of Podhouse Productions, your one-stop shop for everything podcast production, from ideation to editing and recording and so much more. We're your co-hosts on this journey into this world of podcasting as a business tool.
Whether you're launching your first show, scaling a podcast network, or building branded content for your company, PodBiz breaks down the strategies, tech, and mindset behind podcasting success.
We're bringing you insider tips, real talk with industry professionals, marketing tactics that actually work, and all the lessons that we've learned in the trenches.
Plus, we'll tackle the big questions like where's the money in podcasting, monetization, growth, SEO, and of course, how to stay human in a data-driven world. So if you're ready to go beyond the downloads and build real impact with your podcast,
then hit subscribe and let's get down to PodBiz.
Welcome to PodBiz. Today we're joined by Sam Sethi, CEO of True Fans. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Norma. Yes, looking forward to this.
Absolutely. This interview has been a long time coming. So let's get straight into it. Sam, where's the money in podcasting?
What a great question. That's the one that we have to answer. Okay. Most people would say advertising, right? I come from the other side of the fence, which is subscription-based premium content. And that's where I see the money for 26, 27 going. So why do I say that? Let's look at some of the companies in the market space. There's Patreon, Substack, Supercast, now Beehive. Patreon paid out $2 billion in, creator money last year. So that's bigger than the US advertising market alone. You look at Supercast, you said they paid $26 million to their top 10 creators. We saw $40 million paid last year by Substack to creators. Beehive's just kicked into that market. I think people have switched from wanting to have advertising-driven podcasting in which they get interrupted to accepting that podcasting is a subscription-paid, ad-free platform. And again, we've just seen Apple with their new video platform, again, in Apple channels, looking at subscriptions, looking at the way of not having to pay to listen to ads. So again, that's the market I'm in. I'm not saying that advertising isn't a market space. It's a massive place. But I see the drift going to premium content.
That's so interesting. Just the way that you describe that pipeline makes me think of television, right? I mean, I agree with you. I think there's three buckets, right? There's branded, which I love. I work with a lot of my clients and audience dev on branded, right? It's where the brand really sponsors the show. So it's kind of best of both worlds. Then you have ads, and that's bigger creators, free platforms. You can listen, but obviously you're paying with your time. And then you've got this giant subscription fan-based model that is just taking off, right? And I want to talk about that a little bit more. But what you just described sounds a little bit like in the 1980s, cable television coming along. Are you going to pay extra for cable? Are you going to pay even extra for HBO? No commercials, movies all the time, right? And then moving into, the aughts and Netflix. Are you going to pay a one-time subscription?
Mm-hmm.
Then you get everything you want. It's very, very interesting. And we're definitely seeing it on the creator side. It's this giant move. I mean, I love following creators that have built that platform just to see, how they create that feeling of inclusion and community and value for the audience. I think that it seems like something that's easy to do, but there's a real art to it, right? We've talked to a few people about this, and, the people that do it well, it's like they've created a whole new world. They've created a whole new industry because they have created this demand for the work that they make, right? The podcast they make, the personalities that they showcase, the content that they're putting so much time and energy into making. And we say this on an anecdotal level, right? Of course, there's those independent creators that are like on a rocket ship, but then we see things like Goalhanger, and they've got a whole studio and they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the way that you described the 80s with cable, I mean, that sort of took off much later in Europe, right? America led the charge on that one.
Sorry, that is an American example.
Yeah. 20 years later, we sort of got a fourth channel if we were lucky in Europe. That was about it. But here's a question for everybody, right? If you look at the subscriptions you pay today, I pay for Netflix, Spotify, YouTube Lite. I pay for Amazon through Prime. I pay for Paramount occasionally, Apple, right? But the one thing I don't get by paying is an advert. I never see an advert. I have an ad blocker on my Chrome. I do not see adverts. And so one of the challenges that I asked Rob Walsh this at Podcast Movement, how many people in the audience skip ads? Hands went up everywhere, right? So we have this model in which we tell advertisers in podcasting that, yes, we're delivering your ad through dynamic ad insertion. And then we tell them, but we can't tell you how long the person listened, who listened, when they listened, right? We can put some metrics in. We can put in tags to tell you whether they clicked on a link and there was an actual purchase out the end of it. I think the model that currently sits with advertising is one of trust and belief, and that most people who can afford it pay for subscriptions to get ad-free. So James Cridland, my co-host on Pod News, asked Maya Prohovnik on Spotify once, Spotify, you're launching this video model with no ads, right? And it's a subscription-based revenue that you give to creators. And he said, so basically people who don't pay for ads are your target audience. So really, you don't want people who have a free subscription. And she was like very confused by, hang on a minute. So my market is non-advertising based people. Yes, because you've decided to set subscription revenue as the way to pay your content creators. I think everyone's waking up to this. It's just slow burn. That's all.
It's very interesting. We just had Courtney O'Connor on from Oxford Road, who is fantastic. She's their, director of podcast media. And it's interesting because even she said, and obviously, they're one of the largest audio agencies in the world, but she said that, host read is the way. And I think that, obviously they run lots of different kinds of campaigns, and I don't want to say that's what she only said. Listen to the episode for everybody out there. But, I do think that podcast advertising has traditionally done well because you have the host trust. And it's been something where the host is like, hey, I'm outside of traditional media. I'm outside of the people trying to sell you things. And I like this product. It's very interesting. It's had almost kind of and obviously we've come full circle and, podcasting has entered the mainstream for sure. But I do think that there's something about, the trust that you build with an audience as a podcaster specifically, right? And this translates into many different things, right? Specifically in my audience development brain, consumption rates, right? But I do think that host read, there is a place for that. But, when you're listening to something and then a random programmatic pops on, right? And I'm based in Europe, so sometimes it'll just be in a different language. And I'm like, oh, okay. I know this isn't host read because it's just a totally different language and it's a different volume, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't help.
No. What are they saying? What are they selling me?
So the word of the year is parasocial, right? We
absolutely
have that, it's the one-way deep relationship that fans have with creators. Jimmy Carr, a comedian in the UK, once was asked the question, what's it like to be famous? He said, it's like having Alzheimer's. What do you mean? He says, well, everyone knows who I am and no one knows, I don't know who anyone else is, right?
Yes.
So they come up to me and say, hey, Jimmy. And I go, no idea who you are.
Yeah.
I think in a parasocial relationship, we have that same thing. James and I will have people come up to us and say, oh, I heard about your dog the other day, or your daughter's at this university. And I'm going, how do you know these things? And I go, well, I told you, right? And so But the host-read ad, the thing that you mentioned, then goes back to that trust. And I think Leo Laporte on Twit was one of the first people who did brilliant host-read ads. He was the godfather of it, I would say. And, he'd say stop. And now in his own deep, rich radio voice, he would give you this heartfelt sales pitch about why you need to buy the product because he loves it. And this is great and blah, blah, blah. And I think those, again, if Oxford Road is suggesting that as well, it also means you're less likely to skip that type of content because it
I also think that absolutely. I think that there's and not to jump in here, but I do think that, nowadays, because content is so segmented based on, outside of podcasting, algorithm culture, all of that, I think when you find content, you really feel like it's for you. And these people are like you and it's your identity, right? And so I think that because of that, because there's so much identity correlation between the host and the audience in this parasocial relationship like you're talking about, it's not just that like you like the host content, you like the host ideas. You feel like you're the same kind of person as the host. There's all of these kind of psychological facets to it, right? And so when the host says, hey, I know you're like me. I know you're in our community. I know you like our show. And also, I like this product. You might like it. It's like a friend recommending something. The parasocial relationship is almost like a friendship psychologically. Yeah.
I think we're extending that beyond the single podcast. So if you talk about Goal Hanger, the rest is politics, the rest is entertainment.
Yeah.
They do, and I think it's common now amongst most people. They will bleed a new show into the feed of another show to get them aware. But you've bought into the brand of Goal Hanger now. Right. You know what Goal Hanger is. You know that it's going to be two talking heads. It's going to be high quality recording. It's going to be entertaining. And so you tend to buy the stable or the slate of podcasts, not just the individual one. Right. And so they've done very well there. I think there are companies, James and I, again, have talked about it. Persophonica, who I love, Dino Sophos, does a great job, did the News Agent. And, but they don't have a brand extension between their podcasts. They're all named differently. They all have different looks and feels. So I couldn't tell you which one's a Persophonica podcast and which one wasn't, right?
Absolutely.
Whereas with Goal Hanger, straight away I
know. This is a Goal Hanger show. And I do have to say, I talk to my clients about this actually on the branded side, because I have several clients, that are larger companies that aren't necessarily in the podcasting biz, right? They have a podcast to educate, the population of people who may one day want to, be interested in using their platform or product, right? But they may have multiple shows. And I have to explain to them, we have an opportunity to create a subconscious correlation between all of these shows, to use them to build each other up, right? To use them to have a correlation, color, theme, sound, intro, right? What is the cohesive overall experience that someone knows they're going to get when they listen to one of your shows? Absolutely.
Yeah, and again, look, I not bigging up Goal Hanger for any particular reason. I do like them, but they're
getting a lot of free exposure on this episode of PodBiz today.
But I think they'll take Anthony Scaramucci and they'll put him onto the rest is Politics UK, or they'll take one of the other hosts and put him onto another podcast, and so you're building up the celebrity of the hosts as well.
100%. You're building a cast of characters. It's like Friends.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, you've alluded a bit to James in your show. So we also didn't mention this in the intro, but Sam and James Cridland, the editor-in-chief of Pod News, also host a podcast called Podcast Weekly Review, which we are very big fans of. I've been on the show a couple of times. It is the weekly roundup, I want to say, of all things podcast industry, right? You guys have had everyone and anyone on the show. You always talk about the latest hot topics. I mean, here at PodBiz, we're more of a deep dive, right? We're more in-depth on specifically monetization and some of the people behind that within the podcasting industry. But I am the biggest fan of Podcast Weekly Review.
Thank you.
So that is the show that you were alluding to, in terms of some of the conversations. And I want to talk a little bit next about how you got into the podcasting industry, because obviously you and James Cridland host Podcast Weekly Review. You're the CEO of True Fans. You've done quite a bit, but you also had a career beforehand, and then you pivoted into podcasting. You've done a lot of really interesting things.
I'm old. Fundamentally, yeah. I mean, I started out a traditional corporate career, Microsoft, Netscape, Gateway Computers. I ran their online business, etc., etc. I then co-hosted and founded TechCrunch with Mike Harrington. I then got a bit bored and COVID hit, and I, with a couple of mates, decided to do an online conference. No one was doing them. And I pinged Cara Swisher on hope and prayer, genuinely. Cara, do you want to be a guest on this conference that we're running? And she went, yes. And I went, oh my God. And then it was Dan Snow and George the Poet and all these great people. And James Cridland was one of the people. So we did this online conference twice through COVID, went really well. And at the end of it, I said to James, you do a 3-minute podcast every day. Do you want to do a half-hour podcast with me? And he said, if it's only longer than half an hour, I'm not doing it. Of course, anyone who's listened to Pod News Weekly Review.
James has been on Podbiz, so you can hear his episode.
Yeah.
It's very early days. That's very on brand for James. Yeah, he does a lot.
So sadly, I think we're now close to an hour and a half to 2 hours.
It's quite long. I do have to say, sometimes I'll even go on a very long walk and I'm still listening when I get home.
We have chapters you can skip.
No, it's true.
But yeah, so James and I did that, and we've been doing that for nearly 4 or 5 years now, which is crazy. Do not listen to episode 1, whatever you do, because it's
But every podcaster says that. I have to say, for everyone out there, Podbiz, we're a bit of an industry show, but for everybody out there who's maybe on the not behind the mic, or maybe is even thinking about starting a podcast and has found Podbiz. If you ask any podcaster, we're talking like hundreds of millions of dollars in ad, big deal contracts to, your local hobby or hobbyist who really has made, 5,000 episodes, but in their basement, and they just do it for fun and they don't tell anybody about it. I got to tell you, nobody will want you to listen to their first episode. It is a universal truth. The universal truth of podcasting is, no, but don't listen to the first one.
No, I mean, James is very good, and
he is.
I think we've got it down to a fine pat between us. I mean, we need to keep it fresh, but I think we've got a format that works pretty well. I think we do work really hard during the week to try and deliver what's going on within the industry and find the new voice that's currently topic of the day or week. And often, we get them on the show as well. So yeah, that works really well. During COVID, I also launched a radio station called River Radio. I had 40 presenters, and in many ways, we are doing what the industry is doing now, which is we did live shows, 40 live talk shows, which fundamentally were podcasts, and we then automatically turned those into podcasts straight after the show using a company down in Australia called Whooshka, which Spotify bought. But
I'm familiar. Yep.
Yeah. And so it was great. So we would have the breakfast and drive time shows would be music based. So they would never turn to podcasts. But every show after that was hyper local radio. So it was all about schooling in the area or be businesses in the area, and advertising would be local advertising. But all of those would then turn into a Spotify or Apple podcast straight away. And that worked really well. And you can see radio doing that now. They've only just started to do that, but we were doing that 5-6 years ago. But maybe it was too early.
I don't know. I think everything has its time. I definitely have had, remember Clubhouse, right?
Yeah.
I think we all love the idea of live stream, but also it's very interesting. I just came off of Radio Days Europe, and just seeing how radio stations are starting to pivot into the model of exactly what you're saying, right? How can we post package? How can we get this content out to people who really want it? How can we hyper segment out for different markets? I do think sometimes it takes a bigger player to make that adjustment for the collective audience and greater consciousness to really adopt a new consumption practice, for sure.
Yeah, I think in the attention economy that we live in, where we're all attention deficient, I think clip-based content is working really well to drag people in. So I very rarely listen. I don't think I've ever heard a full Joe Rogan show. I don't think I've ever heard a full Diary of a CEO show, right? But I have picked out their clips. And Stephen Bartlett once said the way that they create their clips is a really interesting model. They've got 100 people who pre-listen to every episode, and then they press the space bar at the point they find it interesting. And then they aggregate the histogram of those 100 people, and that's the clips they put out. It's a really interesting model.
Wild. Yeah, we've had Rux Codes come on Podbiz, and he talked a little bit about that in terms of Flightcast and the hosting platform they're building, and, you know, kind of putting a little bit of data behind that and being able to do that from a tech standpoint. But I do have to say, I think, you know, that technology didn't exist probably when Stephen Bartlett started to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes that kind of mindset to create those practices, right? To be like, I'm going to go the extra mile. You know, I once even heard like Will Smith in an interview talk about how he just wasn't going to lose. If there was a race, he was just going to keep going until he won. Like, that's it. And I think you almost have to have this kind of like crazy mindset of like, no matter what, I'm going to succeed and I'm not going to stop. And I think that a few of those people have entered the podcasting space. And I mean, you know, just in general, in terms of entrepreneurship, it takes that kind of mentality, which, to be honest, sounds really aspirational, but the day-to-day of it is like, okay, like, are you mentally okay? You know?
Because being an entrepreneur is just mental.
Yeah. Oh my God, right? It takes that kind of like determination. Like, you're just never off the clock. And so I do think it's interesting that, you know, some of the people who started out with that mentality, a lot of that thinking has translated into now how we market, how we test podcasts, how we're clipping, how we're bringing an audience, the strategy behind that. It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in summary, I'd say video podcasting is today's TV democratized. And I think live podcasting audio will be democratized radio. I think we are beginning to see the cost model of traditional TV networks and the cost model of radio networks being too high. Licenses are all coming up for renewal. Local radio stations are being closed down, but the content is required. The people still want it. They just can't get the delivery cheap enough. And I think live podcasting will be the next thing that people will adopt again. Going back to Clubhouse, I think we will evolve that Clubhouse model into a podcast model. So you will get not just a single person going, hey, I'm live for 10 minutes or an hour or whatever, but you'll get a slate of podcasts within a production like a radio station. So I can tune in at 10 o'clock to hear Norma Jean, and then 11 o'clock it's somebody else in the Podbiz network. And you could go through the whole day listening to Podbiz, right? And maybe some of the shows are repeats of earlier podcasts because, you know, the content's still fresh, it's new. It doesn't always have to be live. And if you listen to most radio stations like BBC Radio 4, it's a combination of live shows and recorded shows.
Absolutely.
But to the listener, it's live at that moment, right?
Yeah.
So again, I think we haven't evolved the model sufficiently yet. But I think when you look at people like, you know, again, Kara Swisher's leading the chase, I think, down in the US, you know, I can see her creating the brand of Swisher with 20 shows in it, with, you know, advertising coming into that and repeating shows during the day or during the week because they haven't got the content.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's something where we're seeing the model change as the industry develops. We're sailing the ship as we build it. We're building the ship as we sail it.
Yep.
We had Dane Cardiel from Good Tape on, and he said, you know, we're all just growing old together, which I love. You know, I think as an industry, we're all kind of growing up together. We're all figuring out the playing field. I mean, we've got everybody from Apple to the New York Times to Spotify all being like, okay, we're doing some stuff with video. And I think the market's going to dictate how that goes. The audiences out there are going to dictate how that goes. Consumer behavior is going to dictate how that goes. And, you know, of course, there are ways to steer that technologically. And also, it's a brave new world.
It is. And I think, talking of a brave new world, I mean, again, the way we metric the industry is changing dramatically, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I mean, death of the download. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know, again, about 3-4 years ago, I was, you know, banging the drum about this. A download is not what we need. And one of my favorite people in the industry is Dan Meisner from Bumper.
Yeah, we had him come on, Death of the Download. And I've had probably 4 or 5 other guests on Podbiz reference Dan on their episode. Dan, you're getting another plug. Death of the Download.
And I think, Dan was one of the first people to highlight that. And it's become so obvious. It became very obvious after the Apple apocalypse when they turned off some of the auto downloading. I think Apple could go much, much harder. I mean, I think, I've said to James, I wish that the auto download was off by default, not on by default, right? They still leave it on. If you put that off by default, the numbers would go through the floor. But I don't think they want to do that. And so one of the things, and I'm going to spin it back to True Fans, I'm sorry, but I am going to do this.
No, please,
now.
We haven't even talked about True Fans yet.
So True Fans is a marketplace. It started out as a listening app, and it evolved from just being a podcast player to becoming a podcast portal. So we did blogs and newsletters and events and merch. So that's one area but I've always been talking and waiting for the podcast hosting industry to catch up with all of the new features and functions that were appearing. Pod roles, person tag, chapters, transcripts. And they just weren't
a lot of
podcasting
2.0. Yeah.
Yeah. But it just wasn't happening fast enough. And I was like talking to friends in the industry who run the host companies, and they are friends. Come on, when are you going to get that feature out? When's that going to happen? No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. When are you going to do video? When are you going to support the alternative enclosure? Not going to do that. And I got to the point of frustration where I went, you know what? I'm just going to build my own hosting company. And in the last 4 months, that's what we did. We've just built our own hosting company. So now
congratulations.
Thank you very much. But I think hosting, I often talk about something called the technology escalator. I think hosting 10 years ago was the top of the escalator. It was a hot new technology. Everyone wanted to get in on it, and you could monetize that really well, and there was good profit margin in it. And through time, technology goes down that escalator and it becomes less and less revenue generating, as in profit margin. And it becomes a commodity. And I think hosting is now a commodity. We've seen Riverside launch hosting. We've seen Patreon launch hosting.
I was just thinking the same thing. Patreon and Riverside. These are companies that did not start out as podcast hosting platforms. They started out as recording platforms and a monetization membership platform. And hosting is something that it's a value add. Right. And it reduces, it reduces, the time that their creators are outside their ecosystem. It reduces a lot of content creation fatigue for sure.
Yeah.
And also it's a value add.
Yeah. And I think that's where hosting's now fitting in. It's a need to have, not a nice to have, right? As in the platforms have them. We saw Captivate bought by Global. We've seen Red Seat Ventures, the Fox Media Network, buy Speakeasy, and recently Supercast. So I think we're seeing a real big M&A moment. But
I do. I mean, I think it comes in waves, though. I do also just want to jump in, right? I do think when a company gets big enough, they're looking at, okay, where can we optimize? And when they're building out ad tech, or they're building out subscription-based modeling, or they're building out a giant recording platform, they're thinking, do I want to keep having to go, from my Michelin star kitchen down to the 5 and dime to buy butter? Right? It's like, that's kind of, and not that hosting is the 5 and dime, but in terms of the revenue model, when you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising revenue, it can comparably possibly be like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I think, we are seeing what I've called them the 5 Ps, right? So pre-production, production, post-production, profitization, and publication, right? So the whole gamut, and up until now, you've had different slithers done by different parts of the industry.
Yeah.
And I started to notice this when Descript started to, not only were they, doing the production after the recording, but then they bought Squadcast. Now they were doing production, pre-production, post-production. Then they started creating clips. That's the promotion part of it.
Yep.
And would it be a surprise if Descript copied Riverside and became a host? Not at all. It wouldn't.
Not at all. I wouldn't even bat an eye.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then would that entity, and Riverside included, become part of someone else's bigger entity? Would they go into, I want to have the whole recording part in my platform now because I've got hosting, I want recording. So I can see that happening. And I think that's...
Well, it's also interesting, right? Because, I mean, what do they say? Build it, buy it, bury it, right? And so you see, and this is kind of, not a specifically podcasting term, but more of a big tech, right? Like Spotify hasn't really bought a big recording platform. They had Green Room for a while in the pandemic. That didn't go that well. People didn't use it. It may have been the way it was positioned. It may have been the timing of the market. There's lots of things. Now, could I see Spotify buying a recording platform? 100%, right?
Oh, the big rumor last year was Riverside was going to be bought, right? That was everyone's chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do think that, as we see this consolidation within the industry and even within, some of those mid-tier players, like we're talking about the Descripts and the Riverside, right? Like you're talking about Descript launched clips. For a while there, I want to say like 2022, 2023, there were all these companies that came out that were like, we provide you podcast clips. And that's what they did. That was their one thing, right? And so you see all the mid-tier companies being like, okay, can we build it? If we can, yes. Most of them did, to be honest. They didn't really acquire a lot of these smaller, bootstrap startup clip companies. Or could they buy it? They didn't. Or, if it's something where you want to bury it, it's like you've just got to... And that's not a nice thing, but it happens in tech and it happens in M&A and in a lot of big industry. Yeah.
Well, I think Green Room's a fascinating one. I mean, I've said before on numerous occasions.
That's a throwback, isn't it?
Yeah, but they have to bring that back, right? I mean, I went to see a brilliant
or they'll
artist.
buy something. You never know.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure who, but I went to see an artist in London this week called Brooke Coombe, amazing soul artist, and I got tickets, but it was sold out pretty quickly after. Now, would I have then gone on to Spotify, found Brooke Coombe, who I actually follow as an artist, and go, I can watch you live from home? I would have done it, right? So why would they not provide extension to the concert tickets that they're already partnering with Ticketmaster on to allow you to have a virtual experience of it as well? Again,
or a Spotify premium concert pass.
Exactly. There's so much they could do. Who knows what they'll do? But I think when I looked at what we were doing at TrueFans on the app side, it was creating that parasocial relationship by creating a portal, a multi-touch point capability for creators. Okay, yes, you want to listen to my audio. Yes, you want to view my video, but maybe you want to just read what I've said. Maybe you want to come to a live event, right? And I don't want you to go to 5 different places to do that. Jason Hoy-Su, who I interviewed recently from Supercast, said exactly the same. The idea of now going here, there, and everywhere to get a creator. I mean, a good example is you look at Mehdi Hassan with his network. He's still on YouTube, of course, because of the algorithm. He's still on Spotify. He's still on Apple. But his aggregated platform is Substack because he wants to have a customized domain. He wants to have a place on the web where everything comes together.
And he wants to have everybody's emails.
Yeah. Scott Galloway, again, has done the same thing. And you're seeing more and more creators do that. I think you can't build community on Spotify. You can't build community, I don't believe, on Apple. And you can't build community on YouTube. So that is their weaknesses. Yes, there are massive platforms in their own right, and they are great algorithmically for discovery. But I don't think creators will want to create their home on the web and their business around those 3 platforms. They will go to the Patreons, the Substacks, the Beehives, and hopefully the TrueFans, right? That's what I'm hoping will happen. And as I said, we started hosting not because we thought we want to take on the world of Buzzsprout and Captivate, right? We're not going to. They're better than us, but we had to change the model. So we decided not to have downloads as a metric. Now, we're the only company at the moment that can do real-time streaming of audio and video and metric across all apps. So let me give you an example. If you were hosted with us, have your audio, we break it down into 6-second packets. And that means we can tell you exactly the consumption data of every user. So we can say, right, somebody was listening on Fountain, they listened to 12 minutes. Somebody was listening on Apple and they listened to 18 minutes, right? Because we know exactly at the 6-second packet that you stop play, that's the point we stop. Whereas traditional hosts download the full episode and can only give you a download metric. So the industry's been bound by downloads because the host can only give you a download metric. But now as a host, we can give you listen time, watch time, consumption data, number of plays, IP addresses, country locations. And that changes the game.
And that's when people listen on TrueFans.
That's when they are hosted on TrueFans, right?
Okay.
So if you listen on TrueFans will do any podcast host, right, in the background. What we've done is we've said, as a host, if you come to us, we will basically do that. The other things we've done that make the model...
But there's certain data you can't pull, though, right? I mean, like Spotify isn't sharing certain stuff unless you go into share.
We don't need... That's the critical part. Because in the past, the first-party data was locked by Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, that traditional hosts had to go, please, sir, can I have some data? Could you tell me, right? Whereas we don't need that because when we're streaming to Spotify, we know exactly when the Spotify user stops listening. So we don't have to ask Spotify, could you tell me, sir, the first-party consumption data?
Because you're delivering second by second, right? So
exactly.
you're timing it on the microsecond of consumption. Yeah. Very interesting.
So that's one thing. The second thing is we have a unique model where we refund you the amount of money you don't use. So we will charge you $15 a month. But if you don't consume your full $15 a month, guess what? You get a credit. So we are a variable pricing, not a fixed pricing. So not to pick on Buzzsprout, they are friends. They will say $20 a month. And let's say you get 25 listeners. Well, you've still paid your $20.
Yeah, but that's the traditional model, right? I think
exactly.
You're paying
and we've changed it.
You're paying for the platform. That's wild. I do have to ask though, in terms of that, real-time streaming data aggregation on the hosting side, how does the Apple auto download factor into that?
So that is the anomaly within that. That is the anomaly.
That was my question.
Again, why did I say I wish Apple would not put auto downloads on earlier, right? It is the anomaly. Yeah. I mean, and all we can do is then record that as a full 100% consumption, right? There are anomalies within it, right? Not everybody has that turned on. Not everybody does that within Apple.
And on Spotify, you can also download episodes as well. It's not automatic, but if I'm going on an airplane, I actually, and I know this is just anecdotal, but I always forget. And then, right when they're like, put your phone on airplane mode, I'm like, not auto download, but download all these episodes. And I know that it's not really helping the consumption data of all these people that I'm listening to, but I don't want to be on a long flight and not have, some great shows I could listen to, including Podcast Weekly Review.
Thank you. But again, these are Apple and Spotify. So, for example, on TrueFans, the app, we have a download function. Yeah. But what we do is we measure your listening of that download. So then when you come back on, we can sync that back up. So we can actually look at your consumption data of the offline content you were listening to and bring that back, right? So
on the TrueFans app. Yeah. For sure.
And the last thing I'll say, and we can look at other parts, but the one thing, we are being very aggressive. So we are refunding you the data you don't use. And the other thing is, if your listeners listen via TrueFans, we don't charge you at all. Zero cost.
Well, that's very cool. And TrueFans has done some cool stuff, right? You can get paid in crypto if people listen to your podcast on the platform.
Yeah, I mean, look, micropayments are something that I think is a very cool technology. It's just taking a long time to make it adopted because it's complex.
Yeah.
One of my favorite expressions is complexity is failed simplicity, right? And
I love that. I'm going to use that, Sam. Complexity is failed simplicity.
Yeah. And I think the industry has been pushing a rock up the hill, micropayments, it's the way forward. It's the way forward. Now, look, it is the way forward, but I don't think we're there yet. So
no, I don't think we're there yet. And, when I see, like Adam Curry talking about value for value, I think it's great, but I also think it's not industry wide at this point. Yeah.
No. And look, let me go back a fraction. So you asked me where I started my career. One of the places I started was at Netscape. And I remember being, the product manager over there and talking about, it's called the web. It starts http:///www, right? And people looked at me, Sam, you're talking Swahili. That'll never catch on.
Yeah.
No one understands what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Give it a break. Anyway, and then we'd say, oh, yes, and you have to go and find off a magazine. You get a floppy disk with the browser, put it in your machine because there was no download. Chicken.
Oh, I remember that.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And then you had to get an IP address. So getting onto the web in the early days was just crazy. It was just,
I mean,
for the geeks.
For everybody out there who's like, what's Netscape? Netscape is one of the very first web browsers that ever existed.
Mm-hmm.
It was created, I believe, as a graduate school project by some guys, and then it was acquired.
It was Mark Andreessen who runs A16Z. I mean, Andreessen Horowitz, the biggest VC in the world, probably. Mark worked on Mosaic, which was the graduate project. And then he moved to start Netscape with a guy called Jim Clark. And it did become the catalyst for creating what we see today as the web.
But also, I mean, those guys went from being like nerds that thought their whole lives they would be like academic nerds to being like
rock stars,
VC tech rock stars. It's very anecdotal for everybody out there who's like, what? It's like, and this is very, very early days. This is decades ago, right? But to imagine something like Mosaic, that became Netscape, that was a graduate school project. I mean, I just think that's so fascinating, right? For everybody out there in academia who's like, what am I going to do after I get my PhD, right? I think it's a very interesting thing because it changed the entire zeitgeist of, you can make it in tech. It created that archetype and that model and that dream for an entire generation of people.
Yeah. And I think we can mirror that today because with micropayments, if you ignore the technology for a minute, the concept is very solid. It's, I want to pay Norma Jean a small amount of money right now as a thank you for the content she's creating. How do I do it? I'll get my credit card out. Oh, well, Visa and MasterCard take half of that. PayPal. No, that's a large chunk gone as well. Right. How can I do a peer-to-peer payment to Norma? Okay. So now I need a wallet. Okay. And she's got a wallet. Okay. Where do I get those wallets? That becomes a technical challenge. But I have a wallet. You have a wallet. Now I've got to get this digital funny money called a micropayment, which is based on oh my God, this is getting complex now, right? So how do I do that? Once I get over some hurdles, okay, I've got some funny money Bitcoin in my wallet and Norma Jean can accept it. Great, okay. And I send it the first time. It's crazy. The first time everyone sends it, it's like 1 sat, which is the micropayment denomination. And you will always get a message, did you get it? Right? And when someone goes, I got it, the amazing realization is so funny. I mean, everyone does this when they do a video. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Of
Are we
course.
live? Can you hear me? Right. It's the same
it's like
thing.
A seance. Are you in the room?
Yeah, exactly. And so what we're seeing now, MasterCard, Visa, Stripe, PayPal are bringing something in called stablecoin. And so you and I won't think about it. It'll be, well, I'll have my MasterCard or my Visa and on it will be digital currency as well. And I'll just be able to pay in that digital currency. So give it another 6-12 months. And yes, micropayment denominations will be, I think, the standard de rigueur as a way of paying content creators from your fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an interesting model and idea. And I think as crypto becomes more and more standard and familiar within the cultural zeitgeist, I think it becomes more and more of something that people can acclimate to. For everybody wondering, by the way, a SAT for all of the non-tech, for everybody not in the tech nerd side of podcasting, a SAT is short for Satoshi, which is the somewhat anonymous founder of Bitcoin. And it's 1/100th millionth of a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's the smallest denomination.
Nothing.
So, well, no, Bitcoin's doing okay. But it's for everybody out there. It's a tiny, tiny microcent, but it's interesting and important to know. I always just like to know that kind of thing. You guys are, from my knowledge, the first platform to do anything like that, where you can really, see that credit, and that it's something where you can actually cash it in if you want, right?
And more importantly, cash it out.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, what's one key move or metric or even a mindset that's made the biggest impact on, I want to say, your podcasting career, but I think a lot of the things that you have done have led to each other. So what do you think is the thing that's made the biggest difference in your success and a lot of the things you've worked on?
Curiosity. Purely curiosity. I think if throughout my career, that's the thing that's driven me. And I think with tech and podcasting, it was Adam Curry talking about podcasting 2.0 and telling me that there's a new namespace. What the hell's that? And then suddenly things called tags, which fundamentally are features. And it was like, okay, well, I'm going to build a little podcast app to see how this all works, which is how I started True Fans. And it sort of seemed to make sense, and the bits were falling into place. And then suddenly, now we see Apple with transcripts and chapters, and now we see others getting involved.
Yes.
But curiosity would be the thing that was the thing. I love finding new tech. So some of the things I'm playing with now are AI characters. We've got 2 characters called Kevin and Kelly. Kevin and Kelly comes from the person who has the underlying philosophy of what I believe in. So Kevin Kelly was the editor of Wired, and he said back in the early noughties, late 90s, that you just need 1,000 true fans. You do not need 1 million likes or 1 million follows or 1 million this. He said, get 1,000 true fans to pay you $10 a month and you have a business, right?
Yeah.
And it's that repeat customer coming back. And fast forward to today, which is why we call the platform True Fans. And I fundamentally believe monetizing fandom is the way to do it, with multi-touch points around creator portals. And I think we're seeing that model occur now. And it goes back to what we said right at the beginning. I see the companies like Patreon and Substack giving creators direct payments from their fans rather than ethereal money from an advertiser, which is fine, and I don't have any issue with it. I think we will see one of the interesting things is Spotify hasn't released their video numbers. They haven't released the revenue. I hope Apple will do the same, that they will release it, because it'll be interesting to see where the balance is between those
is
platforms.
Netflix ever going to release the revenue?
No, exactly.
Okay, what's next? I don't want to be negative, but I'll add it to my list for Santa as a nice Jewish girl.
You're right. They may never do it. But I think,
Sorry.
To answer your question, I think there's always something new coming down the track in podcasting. That's what keeps me excited. That's what keeps me awake. That's what keeps me buzzing. As an entrepreneur, you talked about, the life of an entrepreneur. Yeah, it is a slog, because one, you've got to come up with a USP. 2, you've got to convince people that your USP is the one to follow and the one to get on board with. There's days when you're selling a concept, an idea, a vision that nobody believes in, and it takes time. It's a slow burn. And then suddenly pennies start to drop. And
for everybody out there, just really quick, who's not into the entrepreneur speak, USP is unique selling proposition.
Right. And so, I think Steve Jobs said, here's to the crazies. That is what the entrepreneurs are. We are the crazies, right?
Yeah.
And many of us fail. And the ones you hear that succeed are the 1 in 100. There will be many that start something that fail, and that's the hard part.
Well, I think it takes a certain kind of person to want to go on that journey, right? And I think the journey ends up differently, right? You get to different destinations with different projects, meeting different people at different phases of your life, right? And it's wild. In podcasting specifically, we're such a new industry. We have friends who are bootstrapping it, and we have friends who sold up.
Yeah. And I think, for those that make it, congratulations. I always hat tip them because they're probably burnt out, exhausted, and tired.
They need a vacation.
Yeah. But without those people, I think we wouldn't see the industry evolve as fast as it does, right? We see, it's an interesting thing, and not to bring it down to gender, but it's an interesting observation. Why is it there are more men that are entrepreneurs than women these days? And I think it's men have a natural tendency to take risk. I mean, we start when we're silly boys at 5, jumping off roofs, climbing trees. And I'm not saying that girls don't. I have 2 girls who are amazing. And I didn't discourage them from climbing trees and jumping off roofs, but so many girls are discouraged. They're told not to do that risk.
I think girls are told not to, I think girls maybe subconsciously and socially are taught to be more risk averse. But I also have seen a lot of entrepreneurs that have wives that really support them.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And it's interesting, right? As someone who's single, I'm not further behind. I just don't have someone on my team, in my corner, cheering me on, cooking all the dinners, doing all the laundry, making all the social connections. And so I think when you remove that labor, right? And there's a lot of people, a lot of men in really a lot of tech adjacent industries that have that support and then get to go off and be the, bootstrap or did it on their own or kind of person. But I think that there's a lot of invisible labor that women do.
Oh.
And also societally, not to go down the patriarchal track, but society's built, has been built for the last 1,000 years for men to succeed. And so I've just seen, anecdotally in many couples, when 2 people have great careers, if a woman's going to have kids, she's got to take herself out of the workforce, right? Men sometimes get promoted a little bit earlier, a little bit faster. And so when you, and I'm not saying, everybody's not equal or whatever, but it's just that like men can't physically give birth, right? I think there are sometimes real world hurdles to this kind of thing. And I've met a lot of amazing men in podcasting that are like building things and great. And I meet them and I'm like, and then they're like, oh yeah, I have this amazing partner that supports me.
I'll give you a real world example. My wife used to run MSN for Microsoft, right? And we have 2 girls. Guess who had to take time off from work? It wasn't me because fundamentally, as you said, I didn't give birth, right? And to all those men who said, we are giving birth, stop it. It's not you, it's them. Seriously, please. You have nothing to do with it. Well, you had a little bit, but that's about it. Now, the point being that Jill and I would often see women wait until they were overqualified to get a job, and men wait when they were underqualified.
This is also something that I've said to several people. I get asked to speak a lot at conferences, but also, I submit for stuff. And if I'm putting a panel together, whether it's for a conference or something that I'm putting together my own or a program or a, online platform or something like that, if I ask a man, usually the answer is yes. And if I ask a woman, she'll say, I don't know if I'm qualified to speak on that. And I have to say, I think you are. That's why I asked you. And they say that data actually translates into applying for jobs. Women generally only apply for jobs that they're 100% qualified for, and men apply for jobs that they're a lower percent qualified for. Yeah.
I mean, we were at a VC dinner once, me and Jill, and I was running TechCrunch and she was running MSN. Of the 2, she was the more important person in the room than me, let's be clear. But she was heavily pregnant. And so all these VCs would come up to me, hey, Sam, how you doing? And ignore Jill. And it was, so I stopped one of them. I said, do you know who this is? Oh, it's your wife. No, I said, other than that, she's Gillian Kent. She runs MSN. Oh my God. And so Jill and I call them willy waggers. They basically have a card that says, I'm very important. And that's all they are. And I hear and see so many willy wagger men at conferences and places. Let me tell you how amazing I am and what's brilliant about me and blah, blah, blah. And they never listen and they never learn and they never understand. And I only mention that men do this because, again, what we're talking about is entrepreneurs. I wish more women would be entrepreneurs. I wish we had more women in the tech community. I wish we had more women in the podcasting 2.0 geek area that I live in most of my time, right? Because I think they bring great insight. We've got Ellie Rubenstein from Pocket Cast, who I love dearly. She's brilliant, right?
Brilliant.
And I want more Ellie Rubensteins. I want those people. They'll bring different perspective and industry thought. 10 white men in a room think 10 white men ways, right? That's not going to change. So diversity will help, but we don't get it, and I don't know why. And maybe it goes back to that little boy who climbs the tree and the little girl who gets told, don't do it, you'll fall off.
Yeah, possibly. Well, Sam, what's something that people don't know about what you do?
I used to be a martial arts instructor. Yeah, Krav Maga, the Israeli hand-to-hand combat.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Don't mess with Sam, everybody.
Yeah, I used to be in the parachute regiment, so I was an army officer.
Wow.
And now I spend nearly every living, breathing moment when I'm not podcasting playing paddle. So I am a Sado paddle player.
Oh, you have joined the cult of padel. Fantastic.
Yeah, so I play every day. Normally it's 7 a.m. I am a sad convert to paddle now, yeah.
No, I have quite a few friends who play. Well, Sam, if you had to start over today, what would you do differently to grow faster or smarter?
I don't know if I could do anything differently because the technology's evolved at a pace that we've evolved with. I think, hindsight's wonderful. Everything's obvious in hindsight. Would I cut out some things that we've done? Maybe, yeah. Would I have invested less time in, say, certain tech that I thought was going to be more successful that hasn't? Maybe. We talked about micropayments. We spent 6 months trying to get that stuff working. Could we have done that today or maybe in 6 months in the future? So there are things in hindsight that you would go, yeah, let's not do that again. But no, the pace of the industry has evolved. Like this week, we're adding in more video UI, UX controls, right? That would have made no sense 6 months ago.
No.
So we couldn't have accelerated that. So, yeah, I think, I talk about AI. I think, you look at Spotify DJX, that's a really interesting example of how an AI interface works. I think we'll see that in podcasting.
I've used DJX. I think it's interesting. It doesn't always pull what I want, but it's I love trying stuff out. And sometimes I'll use it. I'll be like, here's the vibe I want. And based on my listening experience, it'll pull stuff. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, if you were doing AI voice interfaces a year ago, it wouldn't have worked. They were crappy and they are tolerable right now. In 6 months' time, I think they will be exciting.
Yeah.
I think, so would I change anything? I think maybe trying to raise the funding that we got recently, raise that much earlier to take the pressure off me. That would have been a nice thing to do. But again, would we have been able to raise that funding at the level we did because we weren't far enough down the road with the technology?
Yeah.
Bottom line,
right?
I
it's
think
the chicken and the egg, right?
Yeah, it is. And, when's the right time? And there never is.
No, I think this is an entrepreneurial. I mean, you definitely have, lived the journey of an entrepreneur so many times. And I also, I'm on that journey, have done that before, have had phases where I didn't. And it's something where it's like, there's no right answer. There's only choices.
Yeah. And it's the sliding doors moment, that film, right?
Yeah. Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah.
Fantastic film, late 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. And chance meetings. And I'm a firm believer in serendipity, right? I think, you meet people at the right time. Again, not to quote another film, but Jim Carrey and Yes Man, that is one of my philosophies. Try and say yes to as many things as you can because you never know. So if you look at, me reaching out to James Cridle and saying, do you want to do Pod News Weekly Review? James could have said no, and that would have been the end of it. We would not have that show today, right? He said yes, and I jumped on board and we got going. And I think you have to be open to things. If you want to be in the entrepreneur space, you have to have, I think, an understanding of the market, but you haven't got foresight. I didn't know half the things that have happened in 24, 25, and that are happening now. I couldn't predict all of those things, even though James and I do a prediction show, which often means that we don't get it right. But
well, he is a radio futurologist. Okay.
yes.
So you're in good company.
Yeah. But the point is that, you have to be open to go yin and yang when there's the opportunity. And so, finally, to answer your question, no, I couldn't change anything because I couldn't know what I would change.
No, you're sailing the ship as you built it.
Exactly.
Well, Sam, what are you excited about coming up within the podcasting industry?
I think we are going to see more and more creators make money and a living from podcasting, not just the head, but I think the long tail. I think, a knitting podcast with 50 people should be able to make a living from that by having the right advertisers target it, having the right fans connect with it, right? So they should make money from the one end of getting that wool company who wants to reach that audience that's very highly engaged, but equally the parasocial fan who wants to support the creator should be able to pay the micropayment and support them, or the subscription and the monthly amount. And I think those two things now are becoming much more available to the long tail and not just to the head. And that, I think, means that we will see more and more creators making a living from podcasting rather than having, what we call pod fade, where, 7 episodes in, they haven't got an audience.
It's just so heartbreaking. Just the graveyard of abandoned podcasts.
I mean, I think the other thing that is difficult, though, is when you've got so much content out there, how can we find the next great show? It's been word of mouth.
Discoverability. Yep.
So I think there are things that are happening that will make that better. I think one of the things that's really cool recently, Buzzsprout came out with a new voicemail interface for leaving comments, right? An audio medium that has a voice interface that allows you to leave an audio comment. Who knew that would be successful, right? Of course that would be successful.
Well, I got to say, in the voice memo culture of today, like if I can't type it out or I'm walking, I'm gonna just, hey, here's what's going on. Here's the voice text. Yeah.
And so I think, again, we will see a lot more tools that make it easier to interact with the creators, so that parasocial relationship becomes a little bit deeper and more two-way than one-way. So I have 3 pillars: discovery, interactivity, and monetization. I think all those 3 are going to get better. We'll get better discoverability. The interactivity is coming, and the monetization tools are not just singular, but they are multiple. And therefore, I think creators will be able to build a career around podcasting, not just have it as a hobby.
Absolutely. Well, Sam Sethi, CEO of True Fans, thank you for joining us here on PodBiz.
Thank you for having me.